Hey YouTube, sorry about this. Normally, I have my Instagram camera all set up before going live on YouTube, but that didn't quite happen today, so you get to see a little of the behind the scenes setup here. All good. We're real here, so. All right. Let's get live here too. Okay. Awesome. Hello. Welcome, everyone. So as some of you may have seen, I am starting to do regular series of Instagram lives and here YouTube lives. So you can watch the replays, share the replays on YouTube, on Instagram, whatever's easiest for you. And so on Mondays, I have my focus is the Monday relief, and that's focused on looking at like problems that come up at church or struggles that people have with church, looking at curriculum, lessons, comments, just sort of validating that experience, talking through that experience, building bridges in that space. This Wednesday one is called Patterns of Divine Partnership. And this is my energetic education space. So this is where I'm going to be sharing different perspectives on different parts of divine partnership from an energetic viewpoint. And so sometimes that will be related to the church, sometimes they'll be related to personal experiences, anything that has to do with this blending of masculine and feminine energy and learning to live in alignment, and sharing some of the different energetic specific perspectives on that is what we'll be discussing today. And then as a little teaser, I have my Friday show coming up, and the Friday one is Fun Day Friday, and that's just a place for live coaching, hearing from past clients, and hanging out with special friends and guests. So we have 2 exciting guests lined up for the next 2 weeks that I'm super excited about. I'll tell you more about those later. But you'll want to stay tuned for those. And these lives happen again Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m. So I'd love to have you join in on those. For today's topic, though, this is probably one of the second topics that I get a lot of stuff from people. Lots of common questions. What do you do when personal revelation feels like it's in conflict with church leadership? And I need to clarify and specify anything I'm talking about here, anytime I'm talking about church, and especially anything that has to do with leadership, I am never trying to define doctrine or to speak for the church or to tell you what is right or what to do in any capacity. Right? My goal, as I see it, is to share these energetic principles and perspectives and say, this is how I like to use it in my life and how I found benefit in doing it, ways that energetic perspective has been really valuable and helpful. And I love sharing and teaching people about energetics and then helping them see different ways they can apply it in their own lives, whether that has to do with their marriage, their parenting, or their faith or religious experience. So that's where I'm coming from in all of these videos. So with that all out of the way, one of the common things when we start looking at an energetic perspective is this idea that there is like this stream of consciousness or stream of truth that is coming from God, and that we as individuals all have our own ability to tap into that connection, to experience it, and that when we do, we then have our individual sort of filters of how we take that stream and then describe it and communicate it and share it and focus on different aspects of that. And so it's almost like anytime somebody is having that connection, there's going to be that personal filter of how it comes out, right? And so a lot of times this is the focus that people will take when talking about the energetics behind revelation and what does that look like for individuals versus church leadership. And the answer is kind of, well, there is this truth bit and there's also this human filter there. And so, I can disagree with that human filter side of things, and I can still hold that they can still be receiving that. And I'm receiving it, but I'm just putting it through my filter, and that's what makes it different, right? And there's value in that perspective. But I also feel like it's limited and in a way incomplete, because what I see this perspective used for oftentimes is this idea of, well, I'm getting something different, and one of us is right and one of us is wrong, and eventually those who are wrong are going to see the light and see what is right, right? And I see this conversation come up a lot, in particular with like the priesthood ban with Blacks in the priesthood, and this, story and experience of like, there was church leadership and this is what they were receiving, and it was ultimately wrong. And in time, there had been all of these members who had been feeling these things, who'd been having these experiences, who'd been trusting that faith and that things were going to change and it was going to get better. And they knew this greater truth that church leadership didn't for a long time. And eventually, church leadership caught up with the personal revelation that these individuals had, right? And when we kind of put it in that perspective, sometimes it gives people a lot of hope, right? It validates, okay, I am tapping into something. There is something important here. I should connect with this, right? And I can hold hope for the future and that things will change, right? And if that's the perspective that it taps us into, I think that's a beautiful one. At the same time, I also see that this perspective of like, they're missing something, they're not getting something, that's where we miss out on part of the relationship. And hear me out on this, right? Because again, I'm not wanting to define in a lot of ways, like, or say that any of us, I guess that's where I want to go with this. I don't want to say that any of us really fully understand the whole big picture. Okay. And I use the analogy and a lot of my experiences that I've had in navigating my relationship with my husband as an analogy that I see for this relationship dynamic between church membership and church leadership. And one of the reasons I bring up this parallel is because I had very much this perspective of like, I see things, I understand things that my husband doesn't. And when he sees them and when he understands them like I do, then that's going to solve like all the problems that we have in our marriage and in our relationship. And I just need him to get those things. And it would be so much easier if he would just listen to me or understand what I'm trying to say or ask for my insight or guidance. Like, I have so much that I would love to share with him and that I want him to know, and like that would be meaningful for us to get there. And what I found through my relationship experience, and that I've learned to see some of the different energetic principles backing that up, is that while there was absolutely truth in that, there were things I saw, things that I understood, things that I knew, and things that he didn't, and that I wanted to share with him and I wanted him to experience. The place that I got crosswired, I guess you could say, or like sideways, crossways, what's the phrase? I think it's crossways, of this idea, was in two pieces. One, in thinking I needed to change him, and like that there was something intrinsically wrong with him. And two, this idea and belief that I knew how to get him to understand these things and that it was going to be the same way I came to know them. Okay. And so to me, that is another part of this conversation. And I'm going to tie this all in here in a second. But I want to go to another place, which is we also commonly say, there's the idea of like personal revelation is for how to apply things in your personal life, whereas church leadership and general revelation is about the general overall census and or instruction. I don't know quite the word I want to say. General revelation is for like the general population, right? And for the church as an organizational and as a system, right? And so in energetics, we look at systems and we look at their stewardship over different system levels, right? So there's like in a marriage, two individual systems of each partner there, and then they come together and that creates a third system, which is the marriage itself, right? And so each individual has stewardship over their own individual system, but when they come together in marriage, they have joint stewardship over that system relationship. Right? So similarly, it's like we talk about like the idea of you can receive revelation for yourself individually, but you're not going to receive revelation for the church. Right. And I think that's a place where, again, some of this conflict comes up because it's like, well, what if I'm tapping into something that is true and that will eventually be true for the church, right? Then, somebody like using the priesthood band example again, if you're tapping into that idea of, Blacks should be able to hold the priesthood, then it can feel like I'm tapping into something that is not in my stewardship level. Right. And one aspect of that I would say that is tweaked is there's a difference between tapping into truth and tapping into application of that. Right. So you can have that truth and that sense of like, yes, this is something that is going to be or that is true. Right. But if you felt like, this thing was supposed to happen right now, and this action needs to be taken, and this thing needs to be occurring, and the church should be doing X, Y, and Z, and you felt like that was the revelation you were getting, that's where it's like, that's not your stewardship. But if you were getting revelation for yourself and like what action you needed to be doing and what was going to be best for you and your family right now in this situation, that's where it's like your stewardship would be in place. Right? So that's kind of like a side tangent. But the reason I bring that up is because there's this other parallel process that I feel like is in place. And this is where the analogy of me and my husband was so valuable is I had to get into a place of trusting. This is what I feel for me. This is what I feel is helping me. This is how I understand it. This is how I like to think about it. He is going to have his own path, his own experience, his own perspective, his own way of arriving at that same place. Right. And it never ceases to amaze me how much when we finally get another piece of the puzzle like connected in place, something that I had been like, I want this. And I was like, well, if only I could talk about it this way. And every time I tried to like, well, let me just tell you this and let me just right? There was always some resistance about it. Right? And usually, even if I was coming from a really good, genuine place of like, I just want to help you, I just want you to understand this, like, this would be a beneficial thing for our relationship, there was still some of that tension. And it's not like, I don't want to paint a picture of he was not trying or not caring or anything like that. It just wasn't connecting with him in the way that he could understand it. Right? And so, what I think there's a really amazing opportunity for us to do here is to learn how to be in partnership with each other and allow the individual process to unfold. Right? And so, anytime we're looking at a relationship dynamic, you can always put it in terms of masculine and feminine energy. And that's going to be a big part of these conversations here on Wednesday is looking at the masculine and feminine energy dynamics. And it's important to know a few different things. If you're new to me here, whenever I talk about masculine and feminine energy, I'm not necessarily talking about gender, personality, sexuality, anything like that. These are two states of being, two pieces, two collections of traits. And sometimes there are parallels with those other things. And I usually describe them more specifically of like, I'm talking about men and women right now, or, whatever. But the point I'm trying to get at is that you have to define the two relationship components, right? So we could be talking about the membership as like the feminine component, and the leadership, church leadership, as the masculine component, right? And so they have this relationship dynamic with each other, and there are patterns that play out over and over between how masculine and feminine energy interact with each other. And depending upon how they interact with each other, that creates different patterns or different interactions that occur. And so when you learn about those underlying patterns, it makes it easier to navigate those two things together and to see what's going on. And so one of the things we have as kind of an experience occurring right now, and we saw this again kind of with the priesthood ban, is there's this momentum of like, this is where we're finding things, this is where we're learning things, this is what we're feeling we need to do, and we need to show up. And there's a church leadership one that is there too, and seeing, okay, you have a process, we have a process, we don't need to be the same, we don't need to arrive at the same space the same way. And in fact, energetically speaking, masculine and feminine don't. They actually are inverse and opposite from each other. And so the way that they find a new arrival point is they actually move apart. And there's this point where it looks like it's going to snap and they're at total odds and it's a breaking point. And that's actually where it starts to turn and flip and come back, and you'll converge at the same place. But again, it looks like we're moving apart, and then all of a sudden it's like we're coming together again, and then boom, we found that same point with each other. And so learning, okay, how do I take this concept of, okay, sure, we're moving apart in different ways, right? So it's like you see that contrast build up between membership and leadership around Blacks in the priesthood, right? And then we hit this point and it's like little things started changing until that momentum was like strong enough that you hit that convergence point, and boom, that's when the new revelation on the general level comes through, right? But each individual party, right, the masculine and the feminine, needs to be following their own guidance and their own direction and trusting that it's leading them where they need to go, right? Because part of the problem is when you're in this space of the experience and if the feminine is trying to get the masculine to go over here, that's actually wrong. Right? That's not the masculine's path, and it actually messes up the energy. So there's going to be a lot of resistance against that. The masculine's going to want to go this way. Similarly, it can be hard if the masculine is wanting to pull the feminine this way. And if the feminine just follows suit, you kind of just arrive back where you are. You don't have the full relational momentum to get you where you need to go. And so having that understanding of like, okay, this is where we're supposed to go. I'm going to let you have your process. I'm going to let me have my process. And you're not going to see where it's going. It's going to feel like you are walking in the dark. It's going to feel like you're moving in opposite directions. But if you can trust that process and learn to navigate it, then you can arrive at that point where there's a critical decision that happens here. We either continue on that path there or we snap and the relationship ends, right? And that's an intentional choice that is made. And so one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing these perspectives and sharing these experiences is because I want to have that momentum for us to be able to continue to progress. And the more you learn this pattern, the easier it is to become, okay, we're going to navigate through anything, right? So some of the first really big times my husband and I went through this, like it looked like our marriage was over, right? And we were talking even this last couple of nights, reflecting on this journey we've been on in the different places and seeing how, oh, that was a turning point. That was a turning point. And as we've gone through different rounds of these processes, we've started to build up that trust of like, okay, we're drifting here, but that's okay. You go where you need to go. I'm going to go where I need to go. And we can trust that we're going to find that similar space again. And it starts to become this thing of what used to be tension and aggravation and distrust and hurt and harm and betrayal and all these things before. Now we're navigating it from a space of thank you for doing your part. I'm doing my part. I'm humoring you. You're humoring me, but not in like I'm just putting up with whatever you're doing and I'm not caring about my own self or things that do need to change or shift, right? It's coming from this really beautiful aligned partnership perspective where you're doing things together. And so That's one of my favorite things to share with people is how this underlying energetic perspective just really transforms everything, right? There are so many new accounts and people and resources and things popping up for helping individuals and couples navigate deconstruction and what does your marriage look like and how to deal with changes in your faith and beliefs and what does it look like to be more self-sufficient and have your own spiritual autonomy and all these different ideas, right? Lots of new language that's being put out there. If you don't know any of the words I just described, it's okay, right? And there's such value, and I love that so many people are feeling so passionate and feeling such a desire to share and to help. And I also sit there and go, if we don't understand the underlying energetics of this process, we actually can make things a lot harder, a lot slower, and a lot more difficult because we're having to compensate for that misalignment with where the energy is trying to pull us, because these energy dynamics, they're woven into our relationships, into our communication, into our experience with each other in the ways that we co-create, and just the same way it would be like ignoring the seasons or trying to ignore gravity, right? There are these fundamental principles that, like, trying to farm successfully could be difficult if you don't understand what these different patterns and processes are, right? When we understand seasons, it's like, oh, there are different timings for different things. There are different ways that different actions are happening, right? You don't look at winter and go, oh my gosh, everything is falling apart. Like, I can't believe this is happening. Nothing is growing. Nothing is showing up. Oh, this is winter, right? This is just a part of the process. I know what things I need to be doing. I shouldn't be expecting to be harvesting right now. And so I really, as we're going through speeding up in a lot of the progress that is happening, and I think a lot of new opportunities for revelation to be showing up both individually and collectively, like in the church system itself. We have been told, even President Nelson himself, of this idea of like, take your vitamin pills, get ready, there's lots of changes coming. To me, the part of the reason those changes are going to be coming, and they're just going to come faster and faster and faster and faster as we move forward, is because we are moving into this dynamic of beginning to understand and talk about and work from a space of divine partnership, right? And so when we do that, even it's really cool from an energetic perspective, if you want to go as far as like spiritual creation or manifestation, or if you like to enjoy that world, which I enjoy looking into the secular spiritual side of things as well as the religious spiritual side of things. There's this beautiful perspective and idea that a single individual has their own masculine and feminine energy system. And from that dynamic, they can create things and manifest things and build them in their world and life experience, right? But when you bring two people together, one who has a core polarity that's feminine and another who has a core polarity that's masculine, which I have a whole other resource I can share with you if you want to learn more about that, masculine and feminine energy dynamics, just send me a DM, polarity, and I'll make sure that you get the video that I did that talks about our individual masculine and feminine energy. What is that? But also this important relational one, because masculine and feminine energy is kind of becoming more popular. People are becoming more aware of it because it matters. It's important, right? But a lot of times the way people talk about it is just from this perspective of, well, I have masculine energy, you have feminine energy, and that's it. Or more commonly, everybody has masculine and feminine energies, and we have to learn how to utilize both and to balance them within ourselves. And both of those things are actually true. And so it's this understanding of like, what is your own masculine and feminine energy, but then also what is that masculine and feminine polarity in relationship that's a little bit different, and how do you navigate that? And inside the it's actually from a workshop that I did last week with my women's group that I hold, and we talked about a lot of these questions. We looked at gender roles, we looked at different responsibilities, different personalities, and how does that all play out from a masculine and feminine expression. So anyways, it's a cool resource. But the point I was getting at is that when you have two individuals and they come together, their energy system amplifies. And it doesn't just go from like 1 + 1 = 2, it's a multiplication and it's like an exponential type of thing. So when you get those two synced up and creating together, it's again not just one feminine system and one feminine system with one masculine system and one masculine system. 2 + 2 = 4, right? It is this exponential growth that happens. And so we are in this process of moving apart and getting ready for tons of these cycles to be happening, right? And in fact, a really cool example of this showing up, I'm going to be going into more of these examples next week and talking about seeing the evidence of this energetic change that's happening and almost like these contractions that are building up, right? But kind of one of the more recent ones is some of the examples of shifts that are happening with garment options, right? And so again, some people look at like, well, we need to be here and this is where we are in the experience and we just got here. Like, oh, that is so disappointing. Look at how far we have to come. And it would be so easy. Like, why can't we just make this happen? But when you understand the energetics of it and you learn to look at it from a relationship perspective, it's not just moving from here to here, right? And in fact, it's been fascinating to see with some of the new garment options that are come out, which if you haven't heard, in warmer countries, there's like a smaller cap sleeve and there's like a dress option that's becoming available. And there's a lot of stuff coming up on both perspectives, right? Some people are like, finally, see, shoulders are not an issue. It's okay. And other people are like having a really hard time at the idea of the garment changing. And what does this mean for modesty? And what does this mean for what's going on? And what does it mean about all these past years where, we talked about it needs to be in this certain space. And well, if it can be more of this like smaller width garment, what does that mean? Right? So there's always that tension in the relationship, and that tension is actually really, really, really important from an energetic perspective if you want to keep a system moving, right? Which moving means we're continuing to grow and we're continuing to expand. Tension is what creates that momentum for it to grow. And so there are different times where we are in periods of being the one stretched and the one finding relief, and the one being stretched, finding relief, stretched, finding relief, right? We go through that sort of dynamic. And when you start understanding that that's just a part of the process, when you have those moments of stretch, where you have those moments of distance, you don't have to feel like things are going wrong. You don't have to turn into enemies. You don't have to experience it in such a negative dynamic. You can view it as, oh, this is a natural part of the process, right? And that's a beautiful, beautiful way to start moving through it. And so understanding these masculine and feminine dynamics is really helpful in seeing this. And that's what helps us start moving into a place of true partnership, because it's not just coming from like our human perspectives and ideas of what does equality look like? What does balance look like? How do we incorporate more of this? We're also tapping into those fundamental, I believe, divinely designed and created and orchestrated systems and energetic patterns that are there. And we're making sure that both of these things connect with one another, and learning to see when is what I'm thinking and talking about and my perspective lining up with that, and when is it disconnecting from that. And the more we learn to sync those things up and recognize, oh, yep, I'm off a little bit here and I'm coming back there, the more we can just, it's like riding a bike, right? It's kind of shaky at first as you're learning to keep your balance and like pedal at the same time. But the more you learn to actually pedal and the faster you go, the easier it actually becomes to keep your balance, right? But there can be this frustration over that learning process, right? And we're going through some of that learning process. So being able to know, yeah, your bike's going to tip over and you're going to get back up. What does that look like? How do we move through that? How do we navigate these things in a very practical, tangible way? Energetics helps us do that easier. So I mentioned again that resource. If you want it, text me or DM me. You could text me too if you want, but DM me polarity and I'll make sure you get that recording from the workshop I did last week. But the other thing I want to make sure you know about is a challenge that I'm doing next Tuesday, March 11th. And it's the 2 languages of faith. And we're going to talk specifically about masculine and feminine communication, because this also plays into this challenge of viewing personal revelation and church revelation that's coming in. Is oftentimes part of what's happening here that feels like there's a greater disconnect in what's going on is in how we interpret what is being said and what it means and how to go about that. And part of that is because masculine and feminine communication are different. And so there are different base assumptions that each one comes from. There are different purposes for what they say, why they say it, when they say it, what that means. Words have different meanings there. So we can say the same thing, but hear different things. And when you start understanding these patterns of masculine and feminine communication, it gets easier to be able to be like, oh, okay, I know that's what you're saying. Here's what I'm needing. Here's what I'm saying. And we can, again, come into this pattern of divine partnership communication where we're getting fluent and able to communicate in both the masculine and feminine language dynamics. So in that challenge, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the basics in understanding these masculine and feminine communication patterns. You'll get a reference sheet for some of those so you can start applying them in your own life. It's, again, been a game changer for me and my husband for me to be like, oh, okay, right, you're saying this. I need this right now. And for him to know, oh, this is what that means. It's given us new language to describe what is missing. Where, for example, masculine and feminine apologies are different. And the reasons you say sorry and why you say sorry are different. And so, we both used to be in a space of like, I need you to apologize or I need you to say sorry, right? And one of us would be like, I am, I have been. And the other person's like, well, I don't feel like you are. And it was really frustrating and really in the space of like, I don't know how we're supposed to be in relationship if I'm apologizing and you can't feel it and you can't hear it. Right. And it would go for both ways. Right. Sometimes he's the one who felt like he was apologizing and I felt like he wasn't really. And other times he was the one who felt like I wasn't apologizing. And I was like, no, I am. But when we understood this difference between masculine and feminine apologies, it was like, oh, that makes sense. Right. And so we literally just a few days ago, like it happened where I was like, we've already done a masculine apology. I still need a feminine one. Can I get that from you? And it was like, oh yeah, of course I can do that. And he knew what it meant and he knew how to do it. And it's a game changer, right? So again, you can apply this in your individual life. You can apply this in your relationships, but it also, I feel like, has this huge potential to really help us navigate a lot of the challenges that we're having to deal with on this collective experience of masculine and feminine and that tension that's showing up in our church system right now. So not only will you get that sheet with learning these different types of language and what they mean and some of the keywords and some scripts, we're also going to break down and look at a general conference talk, come follow me lesson, scripture, and you can bring your own patriarchal blessing. You don't have to share it, but you can just use it as a reference. And I'm going to talk through different things to look for so you can see not only the masculine language that's showing up there, but start understanding the feminine language that is also there. And it becomes really fun when you have this experience, because then instead of seeing like, here is the general conference or church lesson or whatever showing up from church leadership of what's being said, and you get to use your personal revelation and experience as a way to like bridge the gap in those two languages. This is like the intention, or this is the heart, or this is where things are coming from, and here's how it blends and dovetails really beautifully there. And it becomes a very personal and enriching experience that no matter what is being said, you can find that connection taking place. Or no matter what is being said or where you are, you can also find disconnection there, right? So helping you learn to recognize, when do we tap into that disconnect? What is the purpose of that disconnect? Because it does actually serve a purpose, where I'm not just ignoring this or being Pollyanna of like, you just need to find the right way to think about things and then everything's okay. That's not the point. right? Contrast is important. Seeing those areas of disconnect is important. It serves a purpose, even energetically. It's one of the things we're going to talk about. So if you want to come join us for this challenge, it's going to be a 2-hour long Zoom session. You can get the recording as well if you can't attend live. Again, this is happening March 11th at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you can't join, still sign up so that you can get the replay and the resources and all the fun things, because it's going to be awesome. So I look forward to having you join us there. And hopefully this has given you some new perspectives and some new insights on what is going on. And if there's one thing that I hope you take away from this message and this conversation today, is that the same way we want to respect individuals and we want to say, you know what is best for you, you know what is right for you. We want to apply that same thing to this like bigger, broader relationship dynamic. And the more we can operate in a space or in the energy of, I trust and understand that you have a purpose and you have a role here. And I trust and understand that I have a value and a purpose and a role here. And that even if I can't see the ways that we're supposed to be connecting or the direction that these things are bringing us to, I can trust in you doing what you feel is right and me doing what I feel is right, that it's going to lead us where we both need to go and where we need to be, rather than viewing it from this antagonistic, I'm right, you're wrong, you need to see things this way, you need to see things that way, which comes out in a rhetoric, right? We are human beings. It's going to happen. But my goal is to start giving us a new way of thinking about things, a new way of feeling about things, so that we can begin to soften that and open up the doors, right? I saw firsthand how transformative that could be in my own life and relationships when I stopped being so afraid of, he's doing it wrong, or this is a problem. And it's not that I was ignoring some very real, serious things that were coming up. No. But it was saying, I'm going to choose to trust that every human being, every system has this innate connection with the divine, with God. And I'm going to choose to trust that if I seek my divine guidance and I allow others to seek their divine guidance, God or the universe, however you want to think about it, can bring us together in those ways we need to. And that is one of the key aspects of divine partnership, is trust. And it's so hard, so hard. Like when you go through a period of betrayal, which is a lot of what we're working through in our systems right now, again, whether that's your individual life, whether that's a personal life, whether that's on a system level, like or the church, right? There's been a lot of betrayal on both sides from the masculine and feminine. And so there's very valid, very real reasons that I don't want to discredit or undermine. And part of that process is sometimes we need to grieve. We need to be angry. We need to be upset. So if you're feeling any of that, I don't want to dismiss that experience, because it is a part of the individual process. And the thing that is so hard about trust, and there's a whole other thing that maybe we'll do an episode on in the future, all about trust. But from an energetic perspective, if we want to see the results of trust showing up, we have to first choose to be in the state of being of trust, right? We have to choose a desire for that trust, right? Even going back to the scriptures, comparing it to Alma when he talks about faith, right? You have to have a desire for something, a desire for that faith, before you get to start experiencing it and seeing the fruit of it show up. The same thing is true of trust. We have to have a desire for that and a willingness to be open to receive it, right? We can't stay in that traumatized, guarded space. Right? There comes a point where, we've been in this relationship, we realize there's some things off, we may need to separate, barricade up for a minute, work through some of that, feel it. But then if we want to come back into a relationship, you have to learn how to let those walls down. Right. And I feel like that is a journey and experience that we are going through a lot collectively right now, is how do I start letting those things go? How do I start building back that trust? How do I start building back that relationship now that I've gone through this deconstruction process and I've become a new person and I've recognized all of these wounds and stuff? And especially when it feels like the changes we need in order to feel safe again haven't happened yet. those are the fruits of the trust, right? The walls have to come down. The trust has to show up first before we can experience the fullness of those. And so, again, if there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's that ability to trust yourself and to start to trust others. And what does that look like? And where are you in that process? And if you need help and guidance in finding that and in figuring that out, that's what I love helping and supporting people in. So come to the challenge on Monday, sign up for it. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And stick around for more of these lives. Like I said, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to be doing a different one. Mondays focus on Monday relief. So we're exploring, what are some of those wounds or struggles or questions that show up at church, and how can we start moving that wall down, building into that place of trust. Wednesdays here are patterns of divine partnership, where we explore the energetics around things and different topics, sometimes related to church, sometimes not. And then on Fridays is Fun Day Fridays. And those are days where you get to meet some of my awesome clients, hear about their experiences, do some live coaching, and most importantly, get to connect with some awesome guests who are going to have some fabulous conversations around all things LDS, energetics, women in the church. So if you are interested in any of those topics, be sure to tune in this Friday at 10 a.m. We're going to have a really fun conversation with a wonderful gal from Women on the Stand. I'd love to have you join us there. So check out my stories too. I'll make sure to put links to the challenge and links to get that resource up later today. If you want to learn more about polarities and stuff, it's a fun thing. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you have any other questions, my DMs are always open. I love hearing from you. Take care, and wherever you are, have a wonderful rest of the day.